Commander Riker offers a rod of par steel. Data keeps his medals in a case. And Chief O'Brien's poker luck is always lousy until he starts on the dealer's right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton and Denise Crosby.
Hi, guys.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today, we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, episode 9 of season 2, entitled The Measure of a Man, written by Melinda M. Snodgrass, directed by Robert Shearer. This is February 11th, 1989. We have a very special guest today. What luck, it is writer Melinda M. Snodgrass. Hello, Melinda.
Yay. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We really appreciate you.
Catch up and to make new friends, because I haven't met you in Cirroc. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
You'll never get rid of them now, Melinda.
I know, that's it.
Never be able to shake them. They don't.
I've already invited them to Santa Fe. So
God,
Yeah,
God,
I already booked
God,
my flight.
Be careful what you wish for. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
They're like Velcro. They're like Velcro.
We're coming.
Adorable Velcro, though. Very quickly, this episode was sponsored by two of our very good friends, David Gregory and Anil O. Polat. Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode, Dave Gregory and Anil O. Polat. And of course, Denise is back. We're so grateful to have her back as our co-host. That's it. Let's have a ton of fun together, everybody. First and foremost, Melinda, this is the first episode that you are credited as a writer on The Next Generation. But I noticed after that, you are credited as it's seemingly part of the writer's room after that. Was it because of this episode that all the writers were like, whoa, hang on a second, we need you? Or how did this come about?
I have to roll back a little bit. My best friend is George R.R. Martin, a little known writer. We're hoping that he'll break big here someday.
One of these days.
And George had gone out to Hollywood to work on first the new Twilight Zone and then on Beauty and the Beast. And George called me one day from LA. He was living out in LA, and he called me and said, hey, Snod, I think you'd be real good at this screenwriting thing. And if you'll write a spec script, I'll show it to my agent. Now, I was a book author. I had quit being a lawyer. I was a novelist. You know, that's how I got to know George. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. So I looked around and had to decide what to write for. And I had grown up on Trek. I was a little kid. I loved original Trek. And I saw a new Trek was starting. And so I started watching. And George had given me all this, you know, he told me about how if you write a spec script, you never, ever, ever, ever sell your spec script. It's just a calling card. It'll just get you in the door to pitch. And as I was watching the show, I had been an attorney and constitutional law was my specialty. And as I was watching it, I thought, oh my gosh, I can use the Dred Scott decision, which was an infamous Supreme Court decision, which ruled that a slave brought into a free territory was still just property, and he could not sue for his freedom, even though he was in now a free territory. And I thought, I can use that for Data. But I called George and I said, look, I've got this idea for a script and I think it's really pretty good. And if I'm never going to sell it, maybe I should save it for pitching and write a different script because I have some other ideas. And George gave me the best advice I've ever gotten as a writer. He said to me, never hoard your silver bullet. Meaning lead with the best thing you have, the thing you're most passionate about. And so I did. So I wrote The Measure of a Man. And then he, you know, it got sent to his agent and his agent sent it to Trek. And then I got this phone call that they wanted to meet me and to come out to LA. So I did. And I had all my cards with my the other episodes I'd worked up. And when I met Morris Hurley, he asked about me and, you know, my background and, you know, we were talking and then I said, well, I have these other ideas. And he went, shh. And he pointed at the whiteboard behind his desk that had a list of the next episodes they were going to be shooting, and the Measure of a Man was on that shooting schedule.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my gosh. And then there was a hiccup. I came home to New Mexico thinking, oh, I saw the script. And George is like, damn you, you made me a liar. I told you you'd never sell it. And then I get home and there was this weird hiccup where Gene decided to call and give me notes on the script. And the first thing he said to me was that there were no lawyers in the 24th century. And that Data would be delighted to be taken apart. And I was like, so I just said to him, well, Mr. Roddenberry, then we don't have a script. And then Maury found out and got back on the phone with me, and Maury was like, get back out here right now. So I fly back to Los Angeles, and I sat in a meeting and they gave me notes, things to rewrite on the script for 3 hours. And they said, well, this won't work. What would you do? And at the end of the 3 hours, Maury said, I'm hiring you and you start on Monday. So I got hired for the show. And that was how it happened. And it was it was, I had been a lawyer. I'm used to making, correcting, dealing with things on a timeline and on a schedule. And also I've been a novelist. So, you get notes and you make changes. And for example, I didn't have, the poker game wasn't the initial teaser of my spec script.
What was?
I had Data learning how to swim, because I thought you could read all the books, but you've never actually been in the water. And I had found out from Rick and from Mike Okuda that Data weighed like 400 plus pounds. So what I wanted, he's like, okay, I'm ready. Oh, and he gets in the pool and sinks like a stone. And then he has to walk across the bottom of the pool and comes up the other side. And Maury said, we can't do that. We suck at going on location. First, he said, we are terrible at it. And he said, also Brent's makeup will wash off. So you need a different teaser.
They ended up actually using that in a subsequent, I don't remember if it was in an episode or a movie, but they actually ended up using that where Data sinks to the bottom and just walks out. I feel like it may have been a movie. I don't remember, but I remember that was used. Yes.
Then I needed something, so I came up with a poker game.
Well, first of all, why would Data weigh 400 pounds at this point? Metal and all that stuff is getting lighter and lighter as we speak.
I don't know. That was just what the tech guys who wrote they had said he was, and I just thought it would be a funny moment. I thought it would make a funny.
Totally.
It is.
Totally.
But they couldn't do it, so instead they played poker, and then it became this thing, for all the rest of the show.
Yeah. So, well, it became an integral, plot point in a way. This poker game, this significance of how you can read all you want, but at a certain point, when do your senses kick in? When do you fake, when are you able to read the room kind of thing? It was a really nice kind of point about that.
So it was, the thing I could come up with that would do the same thing for Data to not understand bluffing and, all of these various things.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up on staff on Star Trek.
Wow. So you moved from Santa Fe to LA.
Moved out to LA.
Right then.
Yeah, right then. That was a Thursday. They gave me notes, and Maury said I had to start on Monday. So I flew home, I packed up my car, and I went back to LA.
Man.
And forever, look, everybody is aware that Star Trek was not an easy show. It was, but I am grateful because it taught me new skills, thanks to Ira Bear, who really was my mentor, and Hans Meimler and Rick Manning. I learned so much working with them, and it launched my Hollywood career. So despite the other stuff, it was still, I'm grateful for the opportunities that it gave me. So
absolutely. I get that. Believe me, I get that more than anyone, more than most. Yes.
you and I share a bond.
Well, you know, had you been on the staff, I may have reconsidered, you know, I mean, you were not, you were a missing link, because this script is tremendous. I mean, there are beautiful, beautiful lines of that just stop you in your tracks that are written here. And, you know, that's what I was looking for. That wasn't, you know, there in the first season. It was just, you know, not there.
Yeah,
so,
it was, you know, I'm a very passionate writer, and ultimately I ended up being too passionate for Trek. You know, I was always running up against Rick saying, cut it down, you know. So I was like, oh, okay, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Melinda, I want to give you a lot of credit for how wonderful this episode is. I want to say this is, in my opinion, the best episode that I've watched so far leading up until this point. So that would be 2 seasons and 8 episodes. I think it's the best written episode, and really tackles some important keys that I think become principal themes throughout Star Trek. And one of them is about sentient beings and what is a sentient being. And I thought you made a very good kind of debate about the philosophical arguments of what a sentient being is, a topic that's often covered in science fiction, but I thought you did a very good job in this episode with that. And also, yeah, I mean, there were quotes all over this episode that I couldn't stop writing down, so there wasn't any space in my notes.
That's a lot of quotes. I did that too.
Yeah.
My notes are just full of quotes. Yeah.
Me too.
And yeah, so that just to me tells me how great the writing is. And yeah, I felt as a viewer that you touched on some of the sensitivities of what slavery kind of means to us when we look back on it. At least when I look back on it, I think of being viewed as property. And that was one of the themes that was also well covered in this episode that struck a nerve for me, was the idea of being considered property and not having a free will or the choice to decide where you go, what's going to happen to you. And you use data as the vehicle for that storytelling, but still that is something that's happened for human beings on this planet throughout time, and it's a real story that we've had to deal with as a society. So I want to credit you for just bringing all of those key elements to this story and making this episode so enjoyable to watch. Let me ask you some of the challenges that I wanted to see how you dealt with. One of them is you had multiple characters that nobody had seen before, including the JAG officer Phillips, as well as the science guy Bruce Maddox.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy to introduce
Nakamura,
right? Admiral Nakamura as well. Mm-hmm. And did you run up against resistance for having these many new characters inside of this episode, or was it something that was kind of part of the storytelling?
No, nobody ever brought that up. I mean, we weren't allowed to be in casting on Star Trek, but initially they were going to cast a sort of really pretty little blonde to play Philippa, and Maury fought against that. He wanted somebody who came across as tougher, and I just hinted that there was a backstory between Picard and Philippa. I just sort of threw it in as a little hint, but again, you don't play the backstory. If you're playing the backstory, then that ought to be the story, that you shouldn't be messing with it. So I just sort of left that hint so that there was some tension and issues between them that could play out. But no, it went fine. I mean, there was never a problem with it. I mean, the biggest challenge was when I initially wrote the script, I didn't have Guinan in it. Whoopi wasn't in it. And I was on the job. I'd moved to LA and we were getting ready to shoot. And I got called into Maury's office and he said, we've been looking over Whoopi's contract and she's got to be in 13 or whatever 14 episodes, and if we don't put her in measure, we're not going to meet our contractual obligation. So I need you to go write a scene for Guinan.
Wow.
And in many ways, that pressure, I spent like 3.5 hours just pacing in my little office trying to, and then I figured out what I wanted to do. And I went downstairs and said, can I do this? This is what and Marie said, go write it. And I think in some ways that's the heart of that scene is the heart of the script.
There's no question, no question. Now you layer on that added element of, the enslaved people, property, and you so seamlessly introduce those two that will stand on their own apart from each other, the sentient being and the property now, and you layer that. You weave that together in the trial. It was like, I'm going, whoa, wow. Okay, we're here at this level, and now we've just dropped down another notch. In the
and credit to Whoopi in that performance as well, because the way she delivers those lines, she doesn't go over the top. She's not even angry. It's very
sort of
it's almost there's a sadness to her tone that's like, well, this is the reality, and that hit.
I love too how, she's clearly, we don't know a lot about Guinan, or at least, when I was on the show, and the sense that she's taking Picard, who's almost like a child, that she's leading him toward the conclusion. She's teaching him and helping him discover what's really at stake. And her performance was just, it takes your breath away. She was amazing.
It totally does. And she's so beautiful. She's so elegant and beautiful. You can't take your eyes off of her, her face, her skin. Everything. The camera is just, loving her at this moment.
And the lines that you wrote, disposable creatures that do the dirty work. And that's still a reality today for a lot of people on this planet that feel that sense of disposableness and that feel like they're doing the dirty work. And that's a real sentiment that I thought was hit very well. I like the way Picard receives the information. He hears it and then receives it, but the way Whoopi delivers it is just fantastic. And just the lines, you can't seize people, talking about property. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, Melinda, is that you inadvertently touched on something that is a very big topic today. And that is, the pronoun identification with Data being called it.
Yes.
It was offending me every time I heard it. It was bothering me.
Me too.
And such a foresight for you didn't have a direct you did, and there was a moment in which at the end Dr. Bruce Maddox says he's an amazing guy or something to that effect, and you acknowledge the change in pronoun from it to he. And I just wanted to say that's another example of very clever writing and also you identifying something and hitting a nerve in the language with the pronouns. So I want to credit you as well for that, Melinda.
Of course, now I'm starting to get the feeling I hadn't even thought of that. So thank you. That's a really fascinating insight. And now I'm like, okay, is Florida going to ban Measure a Man? Is Florida not going to show that episode again because we're dealing with issues of race and slavery and pronouns? And I'm like, what's going to happen? But
it's groundbreaking.
Feel proud.
That's true. If I got banned, it would be great.
And let me ask you also, so now as you're approaching and you're on the staff and you're becoming, you're part of the writing, do you approach your scripts with the same lawyer's eye? So are you thinking about when you're writing or when you're looking at scripts, like, how this impacts the significance of how this will impact societally? Like, I think that was one of the things brought up in this episode. where Picard tells, the judge, in this case, Philippa, that remember what this decision is going to mean going forward. It'll impact farther on down the line than just the one decision you have here, which will affect our liberty and freedom. And that's one of the great, quotes of the episode as well. Do you approach the writing with that same kind of, how does this have an impact going forward for society and culture?
Yeah, I do. I hated being a lawyer. I loved going to law school. I loved the study of law. I didn't like being a lawyer, but I have used it in almost all of my writing, my books, my scripts, because, without law, it's the foundation for civilization. You have to have some sort of agreements between people and a way to, work out issues and debates and conflicts that are going to arise. So yeah, I do write with that in mind. And it's actually been one of the weaknesses of science fiction, certainly in prose for the longest time, is that we don't look at economics and we don't look at law. We, are as always whiz bang, spaceships, aliens, fights, and so forth. But, the way cultures are going to have to interact is to find a common ground, a place from which to negotiate. So yeah, I think to some degree that's always, playing in the back of my mind is, what is this? And, to be a little critical here, they sort of threw all that away in the first season of Picard, which is the only one I watched, but it was like, oh, and look, we've built all these robots. And I was like, didn't you, wasn't the whole Measure of Man that you're not supposed to build an army of robots? And yet they based that season on Measure of a Man, and then they kind of ignored the whole point of Measure of a Man, which was, hey, let's not do that. So I was a little bit baffled by that choice, but hey,
They also mentioned Bruce Maddox. Bruce Maddox was in, I believe, a couple episodes of the first season of Picard.
MacGuffin. They were all looking for Bruce Maddox. He was like the ultimate MacGuffin. And
yeah, there were a lot of things. Just very quickly, Melinda, there are so many things in this one episode that you started for all of Star Trek. Bruce Maddox, for example, Admiral Nakamura is in a couple more episodes. The data sink into the bottom of a lake. But the big one that I noticed was the poker game. I don't believe they played poker in any of the episodes before this, but since that, it became kind of a hallmark of the Next Generation. It was the heart of Next Generation. There's so many episodes that include that, and that's even how Star Trek Picard series, spoilers, ends with a poker game.
Yes.
And when I saw this here, I realized, are you the person that created this whole poker lore for the Next Generation?
Yes,
that's unbelievable. You got to hang your hat on that. It is huge.
Right? And where does your interest, knowledge of poker come from?
Mostly it's because I thought it would be more interesting. I played bridge. I'm not much of a gambler, so I was a bridge player, but I thought it would be fun, because I needed something with bluffing, because bridge is all about betting and, and it's all right out there. I wanted something where Data would be puzzled, but you didn't have anything. No, that's the whole point, Data.
Right.
So poker was the logical, conclusion. And also I've had George, who started all this with me, George used to love it. He was a big poker player at science fiction conventions, he and some of the guys, and so I'm aware of it, and but not necessarily a player myself, but it just seemed like the right choice to get across what I wanted to get across. So that's what I did.
The bluff.
Can I ask, where was that your idea to bring Tasha's hologram up?
Yes.
So you had seen, or you were aware of our relationship.
I watched all of the episodes before I ever tried to. I watched all the episodes, and I have done some acting, stage acting. I was a singer. I studied opera in Europe before I came back and went to law school. So I've done all these crazy things.
Very cool.
And so I had watched all the episodes, and I also practiced while I watched, repeating the lines in the way all of you talked, so that I
Nice.
knew how to do it. I mean, I still say all my dialogue aloud, whether I'm writing a script or a novel, but I would play it, repeat it, stop the tape, or stop the recording, repeat the line, listen again, so that I got the rhythm of how people talked for the show. So I was very aware of the relationship between Data and Tasha. And so, I wanted that, as he was like, it reminds me of her. Not that it's an emotional thing for him, but that it was a memory he wants to keep in his memory banks of her. So that was, because that's always the balance with Data, is you can't make him emotional, but you also, humans are watching this, and if he was just a computer, he wouldn't be terrible. To be honest, he was the most, by the time I got to the show, he was always the most interesting character, which is kind of sad because he was a robot. But he wanted to learn and change and understand humans. So there was some growth for him, and everybody else was just so perfect,
Exactly. That's what I was always fighting against, by the way. But back to that hologram. And now we come to the end of the third season, Picard, and the hologram reappears.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I only know, I haven't seen it either, but I know about that.
It does.
Everybody,
we've seen it. And
Yeah.
spoiler, yes, Tasha's hologram does come back again in the season 3 of Picard. So again, Melinda, they reuse your idea once again, including
all
the
from
poker,
one episode,
including the hologram.
Amazing.
And that hologram, that because of that hologram, because Data has that cube, and that hologram speaks volumes in terms of the definitive storyline of this, of what the next generation is. You know that now there is this deepening and this resonance between these two characters because of that hologram.
Right.
That he holds that has huge significance, and to include that in Picard, I talked to Terry Metalis about it. He as a child is watching the next gen,
right?
As a little boy, dreaming of one day writing for this show, that he takes that and brings it with him into when he's able to do it.
Maybe so that's a card, could I have a little card somewhere? Like with the card I really did, based on the script Measure of a Man by Snodgrass.
Everyone knows that.
I'm so glad that happened, that relationship, and that Tasha and you just weren't erased out of Star Trek lore,
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
And Brent, by the way, played that moment very well too. I want to give Brent his credit, because I will agree with you, Melinda. I do feel like Brent Spiner's character really was a big central, engine driving this show. And one of the things that I thought he did well was play that moment. And I thought the moment itself was written very well, because he pauses when the hologram comes up, and he says, they're like, well, who is this? And he says something to the effect of, well, she's someone special to me, and there was a sensitivity there. And he said, I'd rather not tell you what happened. Right. Because there's a privacy there as well.
Yeah, he
like-
respects that and the experience they shared. And so, yeah.
Right. And then he finally gives it up because Picard looks at him like, bro, you're about to die if you don't say something.
Yeah. And he's like, I think she'll be okay with it under the circumstances.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
That was very sweet.
Yes. I
That
thought it was a
Picard
great.
said Tasha would be okay with it.
Yes. I like the way you wrote that because it played out well, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because he was protecting his secret with her and his moment with her, but he was also respectfully giving away the details without being, I thought, overly
Descriptive.
repulsive in a masculine way, kind of, that's where another thing that you bring to the table, Melinda, is the sensitivity of a woman, because in the beginning of these episodes, we saw a heavy lean towards a male chauvinistic point of view in the first season of this Next Generation. And we have been looking for more balanced kind of approach to the storytelling. I felt like there was a more chauvinistic point. I know DC Fontana was there and there were other people doing things, but I felt like you had more of an understanding about how to approach certain situations. For example, how were you able to convince Roddenberry that lawyers do exist in the future?
I was really lucky. Gene got sick and he was not around for 6 weeks. And
Okay.
in that 6 weeks period, they got that script to the set and they shot it. And then it was too late. And the funny thing was, I was on a panel with David Gerrold, who wrote The Trouble with Tribbles.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's David Gerrold, George Martin, and me on this panel.
Wow.
I tell the story about, well, Gene got sick and he wasn't around. And so we were able to shoot the show as I wrote it, rather than it getting, torn apart. And David looks over and he says, when I did Tribbles, Gene hated The Trouble with Tribbles because Star Trek wasn't funny, but he went on vacation for 3 weeks and we shot it while he was on vacation. And George is sitting between us and he just starts howling with laughter, like, oh my God, it's like two of the scripts that people love got through because,
Right.
they managed to sneak them through. Gene, it was the whole no money thing made me crazy, and the fact that people were perfect. I mean, what Measure did, I was able to have conflict between the characters. I was able to have Picard and Riker on opposite sides. And that was such a nice change from everybody just being so, we're all together. We all get along.
Even Picard and Philippa had a conflict there. There was that butting of heads. She brought back the idea of the Stargazer. You actually brought that up again, another kind of recall in the script where you're bringing back storyline that we've heard before.
Just trying to give some sense that there's depth and people interact with each other, and that was what I wanted. So
Well,
that's how I got through.
It's interesting. It's interesting looking at Amanda McBroom, who plays Philippa. You guys have you have similar coloring and qualities.
I didn't know she was. I mean, since we weren't permitted in casting,
she'd be like you.
She was cast to be you, I think.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me too. Yeah.
I don't know if Maury went out and tried to find a redhead or what, but yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Well,
you're doing the role,
Melinda. Boy, oh boy, this has been so much fun, and we have so much more to talk with you about. So we hope that you will come back many more times. We have a few more excuses to have you back in the future, so hopefully you will be joining us again. But this has been amazing. You wrote an amazing script. You made us laugh. You changed the course of Star Trek, and that's not an exaggeration. You actually did change the course of Star Trek. Still to this day, we're feeling the effects of it and the references. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely getting to know you two gentlemen and getting to see Denise and chat. And I hope they get everything fixed at the house with all the rain. You can send it all to Mexico. So
We'll get there.
You did
So
a
much
fantastic job in this episode. I loved it from start to finish.
Yeah.
Really a highlight of this first 2 seasons for me. And just wanted to congratulate you on the ineffable quality. To use one of your lines.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say this. Data is a toaster.
Yeah.
Data is a toaster. I laughed out loud. You said it so matter-of-factly, exclamation point, okay? It's a toaster.
So Melinda, we've heaped praise on you just now. After you're gone, we're going to continue to heap more praise on you. But again, thank you so much for this. We hope to see you again real soon. Everybody stick around. We've got a lot more coverage of this glorious episode, and we'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton and Denise Crosby.
Hello.
We've got a lot more
kids.
fun happening right now, starting with the trivioids very quickly. Not a ton of them this week. The Enterprise is en route to newly established Starbase 173 for port call. Chief O'Brien's poker luck is always lousy unless he starts on the dealer's right. Philippa Louvois is in charge of the 23rd Sector JAG office. Commander Riker offers a rod of bar steel. We are all machines of a different type. Data keeps his medals in a case. Data keeps a hologram of Tasha Yar. And Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Wow. So let's just get back into this. I was really excited for you both to see this episode. I had not seen it in decades. I'd only seen it once. And as a child, I was like, okay, it's one of those courtroom things. So, kind of went over my head a bit, but I was aware this was one of the best episodes in Star Trek history. Some people say it is the best. So I was really excited to see it now with adult eyes. I was really excited for the both of you to see this and be blown away. Like, this came out of the second season of Next Generation. How did that happen?
Right. Yeah. First time for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never saw it. Had heard about it, obviously, over the years of doing cons and being up on stage and people asking, what do you think is the best episode? What's your favorite episode? And I was, the measure of a man always was in there. And so, yeah, I was really delighted to see the level of writing and the tenderness and the moments shared. It was just a beautifully illustrated, themed episode, beautifully done. And I had never seen Pulaski. I'd never seen. I had only seen Whoopi when I was, which I won't give any spoilers away, but I later on, and so it was a lot of new stuff for me to watch. And again, seeing it at this distance, safely, not, where it stirs all of the stuff that I would have been going through, while in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, you're in the episode, so you're in one of the best episodes. Even though you're not as big as you normally are.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that little hologram, but it was just your legacy that you left and how you affected Data and how he was sticking to that, promise. And just real quick, Cirroc, I know you were leading to something, but since you bring that up, I really thought that Melinda gave you that closure that you seemed to tell us you wished for in your final episode when you said you wanted to come up and say, and Data it did happen. Like you wanted Tasha Yar, you wanted that acknowledgement for Data to not be like, okay, last thing he ever heard was it never happened.
Right.
And so he's just kind of got this wall up to where he can never express that. And you wanted him to get that acknowledgement. And they said, no, not keeping it, not doing it. And
Yes,
I feel like this gave you that.
Very astute observation, Ryan. And
Yeah.
yes, I didn't want it to end with him thinking that I didn't acknowledge it. I wanted him to know that you and I are on the same page. We both had this experience, and I want you to know that. I was embarrassed by my act. It's like the night that you wake up drunk, from a drunken night, and you look over and, oh my God, who is this next to me? And you go,
how did that happen again?
I gotta stop. This is, I really got to get a hold of myself. That's kind of where Tasha was, coming the morning after, like, oh, she's back in her security mode, and slightly embarrassed of her vulnerability, basically, this other side of her. So you're right, that she by doing that, it not only introduces this theme for the rest of the show into Picard, as we see, but it really has a significant impact in Data's life that won't go away.
Yeah, and I have to say what Melinda was saying about the characters being kind of stuck in their way, or they're already solidified in their way, but Data, we're seeing more, he's like, there's growth to him because everything is a new experience, right? And he's always like, oh, what is that? And tell me about this. And, and so there's that kind of curiosity that he represents. And that same curiosity is the one we have as the audience, right? We are also curious. What's going on in space? What's happening on the station? And, what's that? And so we also have that. And I felt like Brent, I always give him his credit because he's so amazing. And I did tell him that in Vegas this last time about how amazing I think he is. And one of the things that he did when Bruce Maddox tells Picard, yeah, I'm here and we're going to disassemble Data for the first time that he hears that, the look on Data's face was like a child. And it was like, like there was a helplessness, a childlike, and he was looking at Picard like, you're going to let him do that to me? Like as if, there was a real kind of innocence on his face that he was able to capture that expression to me in a very real way. And even the way he argues for his own defense, by talking about LaForge's eyes. He's like, well, LaForge, Geordi has, his vision is better than normal eyes, right? How come everybody doesn't get those? So I just, those kinds of arguments that he was posing, I thought made it really special. Even when he says he comes around the corner and he sees Maddox kind of digging with his book. And he's like, don't you have to ask permission to go through somebody's stuff? There was some kind of exchange with that. These showed me all signs about how human Data really is. And I think that's what Tasha brings up for me. It shows me that Data is more human than robot in those kind of way, where he's had an emotional connection with somebody, a physical connection. He has these kinds of curiosities like a child. So these are like qualities that are human-like,
I think what we're also experiencing in watching this is sometimes Data is more human than the humans. And what is going on too, which I love, is within the other characters, their connection with Data, what they're navigating is their own struggle with accepting that, yeah, the reality is this is an android, but he is not, he's not an android. He is my friend. You know, Riker says he is my friend, but which basically he's saying, he is one of me. He is, he is one of us, so it's their conflict within themselves that they're always having. And this exemplifies the perfect dilemma for them at this moment, because they want to, no, we're taking this is a machine. This is just a machine. We've got to technically, break this thing up and disassemble it and look inside. But they're so, the rest of the crew is so personally invested and connected to this friend. So it's a wonderful, dilemma that's introduced all the time.
And then to kind of echo your point about Data being more human than human sometimes, when his belongings are being, kind of displayed by Picard, and he says, "And what are these?" And those are my medals. And Data says, "Is that vanity?"
Right.
He literally questions it, like, is it vain for me to
that's self-awareness.
collect my medals? That's a self-awareness, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. I thought that's a great thing. And then the book. He said, "What about this book?" And he says, "Well, that was a gift that you gave me, and it represents friendship and service." So
that's sentimentality. Another very human.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then he brings out the hologram of Tasha Yar. And so these are all human sides of Data,
Right.
where he's exploring his own version of humanity, his own, toaster version of humanity. But it's something new. It's new life. Like Picard was making the argument in his closing statement about exploring new life.
That's right. And Philippa towards the end, sizes it all up, for us, in that it's up to him now to find the soul, to develop that's for that Data to experience now, explore it, if in fact he has a soul. She says, "I don't even know if I have a soul."
That was a great line as well.
My God, yes. We're told that, but what does that mean for each one of us?
And
but
that
who
was
doesn't
another
have
thing.
a soul?
I was just
Riker didn't have a soul. Sorry.
No, he was just doing his job. Actually, that was a question I wanted to ask Melinda, but I was like, there's way too much to talk about than these details. But like, I thought that's a lot. That's something that an attorney would come up with, is forcing somebody to take a side that they don't maybe subscribe to necessarily, but he's being forced to do it because otherwise, so they explain that very well. I also want to point out very quickly that you both mentioned More Human Than Human. Shout out to White Zombie. That's a great White Zombie song, More Human Than Human. I just know that everybody's very excited that you both mentioned that. But the line that what Picard said, and there's way too many to quote them all, but when he points at Data and he says, what is he? He says, "What is he then? I don't know. Do you? Do you? Do you?" And it was just so beautifully delivered, well written, loved it. And the line Cirroc you were referencing, when he says, our principle is to, what is it? Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
Right.
And I feel like that was kind of like the checkmate moment, right?
I loved that. Yeah.
The way also the chemistry between Philippa, I want to call her Dr. Philippa, but the judge Philippa, let's say, and Picard, I thought it was written very well. There was a moment where they were meeting each other, and he says, "You know what I feel like doing?" And she said, "Oh, you want to bust the chair across my teeth?" And he was like, "After that." And I was like, after that.
Oh.
Like the contention
Kinky.
in their relationship was kind of like, whoa, okay.
Picard's a
And then
little kinky.
yeah. And then after that, she says to him, she calls him, "You're such a pompous ass
Yeah.
and damn sexy man," or something
I
to that
know. No.
effect. And I was like, where's this going? This
Yeah.
is
I
These
know.
guys are
I
savages.
know.
They're Klingons
I
practically.
should have. I wanted to
yeah, they're
ask.
practically Klingons. Exactly.
I wanted to ask Melinda if that was her line or is that, one of the added lines of the other, to just interject, because they're trying to, give Picard that, heroism that put him up in kind of sexy. Anytime
Leading
they
man.
can
Yeah,
sex
sexy
him
man.
up a little bit,
He's so
Yeah.
hot.
They're looking for sex up moments. So
Yeah.
that was clearly a little,
No.
nod to that. So,
Yeah.
we got it. We got it.
The part I thought was cold-blooded was when Riker says Pinocchio is broken.
Yeah.
I thought that was excessively harsh language that didn't need to be. Like, he could have proved his point. He turned him off and said, "Okay, it's just a machine." I thought that was like almost like trying to sting.
I think you're so right, because that's really well thought out. Because if in fact Riker is torn up that he has to do this, he would only, he's only doing it because the alternative was unthinkable. Okay.
Mhm.
So he's going to do this in hopes that Picard is even better than him.
Yeah.
But he's going to do. So with Data being off, why would he be even harsher? Like,
Right.
who's he saying that to?
All he had to
For
do
our
is say, all he had to do is
Yeah.
say, "I rest my case. Data is a machine.
Exactly.
I rest my case."
Exactly.
And then he could have walked away.
Very well.
But the Pinocchio is broken is a hard. It's language that's used to tear somebody down.
Absolutely.
It's destructive language. And I thought, why are you taking a low blow on him? And
yeah,
especially when this is something you don't want to do. I can hear Maddox saying that. Bruce Maddox, I can hear him chiming in from the sideline.
Absolutely, because that's how he feels. Yeah, that's how he feels.
Great.
That's not how Riker feels.
No, it would have been great
at all.
That line came from Maddox. If he had said that, I would have bought it. I didn't like Riker saying it, and he was like cold-blooded about it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
It's too much, but there were so many good things. I love how Picard essentially is standing up for Data's rights.
Yeah.
And to me, this is one of his best qualities, and this is an example. Picard showing real leadership to me. Like, this is a leadership quality. This is when you stand up for someone and you say, "I'm going to find a way." What can Data do? Can he resign or make him resign? He's not, finding a way is the leadership quality in Picard, saying, "Okay, well, I'm not going to quit there. We'll go to trial. We'll do this. We'll do that." That's what a leader does. He finds whatever means are at his disposal that are, within the rules and within boundaries to try to get his point across and convince people about what's right. That's leadership, not forcing somebody to believe what's right, but actually convincing them in an argument.
You know what? Yeah, I thought that this was the most convincing argument, if you will, for making Picard likable. This episode, I feel like this was the most likable that he has been written out of the first 30 or so episodes. They were the most successful at making him a character that we really like. In this one, I personally thought, I was like, this is a guy that he's got a good moral compass, he's smart, he's compassionate, very different from the guy we were introduced to in the first few seasons that was just kind of a grumpy Gussie. But
incredibly loyal to his
crew. A lot of heart there.
Yeah.
However, guess what, everybody? It's time for the home run of the episode. We can't get out of that.
Too long.
I know. That's why I was looking right at you when I said that, Denise.
Oh, you silly goose.
Denise, who gets
Oh,
the home
boy.
run of the episode today?
Wow. I got to give it to Data. He just, he really just, this is his episode. It just really gives him a lot to ponder, a lot of sides of him to to expose, to question, we see this sort of prism of how he conducts himself in this world, and it was very touching. He was very loving in this episode. So I give him the home run.
Leave it to Tasha Yar to talk about every side of Data being exposed. What about you, Cirroc?
Not in that way.
Oh, my mistake.
Not in that way.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one to Melinda Snodgrass. She wrote this episode on her own, came up with some very important themes that continue to resonate throughout the Star Trek community all these years later. And also having to, really go from being an unknown television writer, to just breaking in with this kind of a script, with this quality of a story. I'm going to say that she gets the home run for me. Also having to butt heads against Roddenberry and the likes in order to get her message across and staying strong with her themes that she fought for. And also the idea that she took the Dred Scott decision and took that real legal precedence and turned it into a science fiction episode. And that to me is a kind of genius that I like to see on display. It takes something very real and puts it in the context of fantasy and allows us to think about these kinds of subject matter in a way that we normally wouldn't. And that's why I'm going to give Melinda Snodgrass the home run of the day.
Yeah, I'm down with Melinda M. Snodgrass. That's the home run of the day for me. Not just because of what an incredible episode that she wrote that still resonates to this very day. Everybody's constantly still talking about it. But that she, like Cirroc said, she created these themes that are still going. Like the poker, game. I mean, that wasn't just revisited in Picard. It was almost like the heart of the Next Generation. It represents the Next Generation. A lot of things that she came up with, but also because it almost felt like, and I can't really put myself back in what, the viewers were feeling in 1989. It felt like it gave the Next Generation a pulse. It felt like it was kind of hovering down here, and then bing, it got like a really, and I feel like there were maybe some people in 1989 that just kind of stopped and caught themselves like leaning forward a bit, saying, holy shit, this show can be really good. Or, that's what I'm thinking. That's what it feels like. But home run of the day for her. Can't say enough good things, but we can say enough good things about these incredible people. Wait, that doesn't sound like a compliment. I meant it as one. And they are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey, Bill Victor Arucan, Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Anna Post, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Neal Akasaka. Our good pal Justine Norton-Kertson, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manosfi, Marcia Classic Schreier, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason the Outrageous Okun. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got the free-for-all coming up next. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot of compliments. Somebody's going to say this episode was terrible. It's probably going to be... No, nobody's going to say
Homer.
that. Probably Homer. You're right. He's there.
Homer.
All right, everybody, stick around. We will be right back on the 7th rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the 7th rule. Denise Crosby, Cirroc Lofton, of course. This is the free-for-all. Look who's here. It's Melissa Longo. We've got TJ Jackson-Bey. I'll just bet he's in Missouri. Nice background, TJ. Everybody listening, he's got an identical background to Cirroc. That's pretty awesome. That's Imo Radka style right there. We've got Chris McGee here, Allison Leach Hyde as well. We've got Eve England out in Wales, Dr. Susan V. Gruner. Mai is live in Tokyo, probably. Carrie Schwent, Crafty Bear. We've got Justin Weir, aka Shag 840. Faith Howell is hanging out on the Enterprise D. Goldu Scott Jensen is here. And of course, Jason the Outrageous Okun. All right, everybody. So, first things first, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I'm going to say like an 8.2. I'm going to say 8.2.
Getting a lot of nods. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
This one goes to 11. I'm going to go 9.1 on this one.
That's a 10 from Sue.
All right. The answer is, it's definitely taller than any NBA player. I'll tell you that much. It is a 9.1. Wow.
DJ.
That's because
Denise showed up. Is that the highest score so far?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Without a doubt.
TJ, what did you say?
I said 9.1.
Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Excellent. Also, did everybody catch the non-appearance mentions today? I got 2. It was Dr. Noonien Soong and Lore. I don't know if there are any others.
Unless you count the Stargazer.
Yeah, considered. I do feel like the Stargazer is a character, but
there's another.
Homer would be pissed. Oh, there's another? What do we got?
Yes. It was a little known security officer named Tasha Yar.
But there was an appearance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said
did he actually turn it
was
on?
so good. It was because
Yeah, he did turn it on.
Oh, he did all right.
He turned it on, baby. He turned it on.
Fully
So
functional.
here's my Homer argument for this.
Intimately.
Homer.
Denise Crosby, the actor, was not recorded in this episode.
True.
And so it's still a non-appearance mention.
Oh, we need Homer.
Yeah, I have a feeling Homer would get whiplash shaking his head on this one, but we'll ask him. We'll ask him when he gets back.
Well, then we'll have to add Pinocchio to that list then.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Pinocchio
screens are cut.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Melissa Longo, what's up? Radical Shirt. What did you think of this episode?
I love this episode. I love this episode. It's probably one of my favorite Star Trek episodes of all time. Just because it's that good. I love episodes that are like this, that are kind of stripped down, that are kind of bare bones, and they look at the humanity of us all. And for me, an episode like this represents what Star Trek really is about. And it's the exploration of what it means to be alive and what classifies a life. And I love that Star Trek explores that in every aspect it possibly can. I love that. And I love that it explores the idea that one life isn't more important than another life. And I felt that very strongly in this episode. Yeah, it was great. The scene between Guinan and Picard blew me away. I watched that probably more times than I could count. But when Picard says the word property, it hit me in the face like a ton of bricks, because it was so weighted, and there was so much subtext behind that word, and it meant so much, and it encompassed what this whole episode was about, and yeah, and that exploration of life. And I have so much more that I could say about this episode. I'm going to have to save it, but all good stuff. I love everybody in this episode, every performance. And I love the tribute to Tasha and how she was included in that as well. So yeah, great episode.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. Good stuff. Can't wait for the rest of it. I'd like to call Eve England out in Wales to the stand. Eve England, you are an attorney, are you not?
I am, but not this kind of attorney. I've never once been in a court, but I did like some of the legal stuff in this. And I might well spend a little bit more than 2 minutes, because I really enjoyed this episode, and definitely the best TNG episode since Conspiracy, which I'm glad you gave me the heads up, Brian, to watch it, because obviously I haven't seen it before, and yeah, it was just so fascinating, and I feel like I need to watch it again, because I'm sure there's so much more complexity in the layers that I probably didn't pick up the first time. So definitely going to go back and rewatch this. So I've got a few points to say, but just to sort of start off with a sort of slight disappointment that I had with this, but I appreciate the reason they didn't do this was timings. But I would have loved them to have had Dr. Pulaski come and defend Data, because I feel that her character would have brought so much weight to that argument, because she, as we know, she started off just treating him as this robot, but by this episode, she's there then as one of his chosen friends to, at his leaving party, which I think tells a great deal about how she's been a mentor, and she's constantly pushing him to explore his humanity. So I would have loved to have seen that, but appreciate, they wanted to keep it a bit tighter for that.
Great point.
Yeah, and I just love that. And I would have just loved to see more of her, because you all know I'm a big fan. But in terms of some of the points that sort of struck me when I was watching it, the first just seemed, I thought it was a bit odd how such a momentous kind of decision, a legal, a key legal principle was almost made summarily by that captain without any due process or any kind of third parties getting involved. So I thought that was quite interesting, sort of in terms of a criticism of the Federation, and is what really is their legal system like if they can just have one person making this kind of decision without a proper hearing and time to prepare, etc. And then related to that, I thought it sort of made me think about the Voyager episode where the Doctor is arguing that he could have IP rights, and I was like, and I don't recall, and maybe I've only seen that episode once as well, so I might need to go back, but I was thinking surely this episode would have established some sort of legal precedent for that case. And I don't think they mentioned it, but I'm going to go back and double check, because I thought that was quite interesting as well. And as Melissa said, I just loved all the philosophical aspects and that reference to property and, the weight that carries in terms of, our fairly recent history. And it certainly reminded me of other shows, how Star Wars, uses the clone army, uses their droids and just treats them as just dispensable and expendable. So I thought that was really interesting. And there's also a British TV show called Humans, which is kind of based in the sort of near future where there's androids, and then it's all about that because we're basically just using them for slaves for all sorts of awful things. So it's just such relevant conversations and topics to explore. And I just thought the way they distilled that right down, as you said, Melissa, is just so interesting, so powerful. And then I'm not going to be here for the things left unsaid, so if you'll just bear with me. The one criticism I had with this whole episode was how that captain ruined her put down of Picard. I was like, you're saying he's a pompous ass, and then you go and say he's sexy. I was like, no, you have ruined this. I was like,
I pictured you getting mad at that too. I knew you would.
And
I was like,
Eve, I brought that up.
satisfaction. Oh, good,
I
good.
brought that up.
I was like, that's so inappropriate.
Yeah, I wanted to find out, was that an add-on, by one of the producers just to sex up Picard? They're always trying to, make him juicy and sexy and, make sure we get that he's sexy,
Yeah, because and I just
can't make
felt,
up our own minds, so we have to have
so,
someone say
it
it.
was just so odd, wasn't it? And I just thought, he just, and I know that there was, I can't remember which episode it was, but he was sort of going on about Pulaski and was speaking to Troy about, whether she was doing her job properly. And I think the way it's been presented so far is that he seems to have an issue with women in authority anyway, and he doesn't seem to speak to them with the respect I think we would have if this show was being done now. So it did annoy me how I was actually, and James was there, and I was like, when she called him, I was like, yes, this is brilliant. And then she goes, oh, and you're very sexy. I was like, oh no. Yeah, I shook my head at that one. That was the only negative point I had for the whole episode, which I think, for me is probably a really positive thing.
Well, she
So I
couldn't
love
say that you couldn't even say that to a man right now.
No.
He'd call you out, he'd call you on that and, be able to have every right to do so. Just the opposite were true.
It was just really awkward. I just didn't feel they had any chemistry either. It was just a bit weird how their interaction just felt quite false to me. I thought she was a fairly good character otherwise, but I didn't think she needed to have that romantic connection with Picard.
All right, great stuff. Thank you very much, Eve. You may step down. Allison Leach Hyde, what's up? How are you? What do you think of this one?
I love the episode. It has all the things we love about Star Trek in it. We are defining, or not even defining, exploring what it means to be alive and considered an individual and a human. And we have used the term human for everyone, really, in the end. And so I love that. I thought all the actors brought their A game. Maddox was great. Philippa Laveau was great. I'm a little sad we didn't get a lot of Geordi. That is in the extended edition of this episode. If you can get your hands on it, there is more Geordi in it. And it's a wonderful scene because, they're best friends. There should be more scenes with Geordi and Data in this. This is, really, when you're going through something hard, you want your best friend with you. So that's my criticism of this episode, is there should be more Geordi. But that's my criticism of almost every episode, that there should be more Geordi. So, Nakamura, when he comes onto the bridge and just like offhandedly just says, oh, Commander Maddox is here to disassemble your android. I'm like, what? That's an actual being. Like, we talk about disassembling things that are broken to make them better, but we know Data's not broken. So that word got me, like, right in the beginning. I'm like, no. And always since a kid, I'm just like, we can't use that word. He's an individual. We can't do that. You can't take him apart to make more of him. So that's, it's horrible. Like, he's not that. And shout out to O'Brien getting to be in the first poker game for next. That's a great lore to be in. So I'm going to end it there. But those are my happies and sads for the episode.
Oh, that's fun. Happies and sads. It's very, very happy to see O'Brien. Yeah, in the very first poker game that we see. Chris McGee, what's up? It's the Dark Lord. What do you think of this one?
Oh, I hated this episode.
No.
I've only seen it at least a dozen times, so much so that I even went to a theater to watch the extended cut of the episode back when they were promoting Blu-ray season 2, which is on the Blu-ray, actually, if you want to watch the extended version of it. The dialogue was just so incredibly well written. Data's question about replacing all human officers' eyes with cybernetic implants, that was just so powerful, I thought. And what more can be said? As Melissa brought up, the Guinan bringing up the point of slavery was just absolutely perfect. Absolutely just hit you like a ton of bricks, like she said. I will say, any fans of this episode, besides myself, of course, go check it. If you haven't already, check out the Legal Eagle video on YouTube that discusses this episode. I think it's quite interesting. Maybe it's just because I'm a sucker for courtroom dramas. It's the reason why I love Ad Astra per Aspera from Strange New Worlds. But I think it's quite interesting. On the technical side, Data mentions he has a storage capacity of 800 quadrillion bits. You may have already talked about this earlier. I don't know, but I'll go ahead and mention that is equivalent to about 100 petabytes or 100,000 terabytes. That's a little bit more relatable. Right now, the largest computer in the world, the Summit, or at least it was as of 2020. I don't know about now, but the Summit by IBM has 250 petabytes of storage, so more than doubling that. To bring it to something a little bit more relatable, maybe for those of us who are familiar with graphics cards for desktop computers, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090, which was released again about in 2020, has between 29 and 35 trillion operations per second. So if Data has 60 trillion operations per second, one of those video cards is about half a Data.
Wow.
So to speak.
So is he smarter than my iPhone 12 or not?
Bring it
Look
home
that one
for
up.
us.
All right.
Yeah. Come on, Chris, bring it, narrow the thing. Yeah.
Bandwidth.
Can I pull it? Can I Google it?
Is he better than Google?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Data
that's a good
better than
question. What
Google?
about Chat GPT though?
Right.
It is Chat.
I'm going to ride with Data on this one.
As for the memorable quote of the episode, holy cow, there are so many because I've seen this so often. I almost know it by heart, almost every line. I had to pick one though, so I went with the one that I thought was the most interesting. I don't know how else to describe it, and that is ineffable quality.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And you've got that ineffable quality, Chris. TJ Jackson-Bey is here. His quality is very effable, and we love it. What do you think of this one?
Oh man, this episode, I could not talk enough about it. So I'll have a lot of stuff for things left unsaid. But for right now, a couple of points that really jumped out at me is in the ready room, when Data made the comparison, to replacing all human eyes. Really what he was doing was calling out a hidden bias in Picard, because Picard, was like, he kind of took a step back and said, whoa, for a moment, I didn't think about it like that. And to Picard's credit, rather than get defensive and try to defend that bias, he recognized and addressed it and said, I need to rethink, how I'm looking at what's happening here. And I think that's an example we could all learn from. Also, when Data was speaking in his defense, one of the things that he said was that the substance and the flavor of the moment would be lost when he was making that comparison. And, that made me realize that Data understands and intrinsically what a soul is and has one. And, that's something we kind of, thought about before when Dr. Graves replaced him. But when Dr. Graves was downloaded back into the computer, it was just information. So there's some factor to, the construction and experience that Data has that makes him alive. That's not just regular Data. See what I did there? Data. And someone mentioned this, I think it was Eve, that Dr. Pulaski was at his going away party. But not only that, so, for all the non-Pulaski fans out there, I'm a Pulaski fan. Data quoted Pulaski when he was talking about, life is rarely fair. And so not only has Pulaski grown in this relationship, but Data reciprocates. And so, I think that's more points in favor of Dr. Pulaski for those that don't like her based on the fact that they started off in a little bit of a rocky relationship. All right, second to last, when Riker is giving his presentation and he takes Data's hands off, I thought that the actress that played Philippa Lavoie did a wonderful job because she kind of jumped and was shocked, and the look on her face was like, oh my God, I ordered Riker to do this. I did not think he was going to go this far. And so just without a line, without anything, with just the camera on her, she was able to just kind of sell that moment for me, and I thought that was exceptional. This course, makes mention of course, this episode makes one of the mentions of my favorite subjects, which is metaphysics. When Lavoie is summing things up, she says this case has dealt with metaphysics. It's dipping into subjects that that are just beyond black and white, letter of the law, type of stuff. And I'll add more in things left unsaid, but I have so much to say about the Guinan and Picard scene that I won't even start into it here. But I'll end with a line kind of like Chris did, and this is one that always gets me when I watch this episode. And it's in Picard's, when Picard is basically, slamming the door on this case. He asks Maddox, what if Data meets your third criteria, even in the least, which is consciousness? What is he then? And he turns around to everyone and says, do you know? Do you? And that's it. There's no question after that. So I'll end on that note and add more later.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. TJ, look, it's Dr. Susan V. Gruner. Hello, Susan. Welcome back. It's been a little bit of time. We missed you. What'd you think of this episode?
Well, let's just start right from the beginning. Can you see this?
It's a 10, she says.
Want to just make that clear right now. I love this episode. I love the storytelling, the way they layered it, its relevance within the whole idea of what they were talking about. What I mean specifically is they start with the poker game with Dr. Pulaski playing poker with Data and Riker and everybody. That is just great. It shows they're friends. And I just love that. They showed Data packing and how he's packing the book. And then the little thing with Tasha, all the things that mean something to him. He's thinking about this. So they're getting us set up for the rest of the show. I think this show should be required watching for certain people in the United States right now. It's relevant today, and people need a little reminder of some things. And that's all I'll say about that. But it was a great episode. I love Guinan and her purple stuff. Oh man, purple is just such a great color for her. Purple's just a great color, period. But yeah, it was well done. Very Star Trek. Loved it. Absolutely love it.
The purple in your hair is awesome too, by the way. For anybody just listening in, purple's great on Sue as well. Mai is live in Tokyo. What's up, Mai? What did you think of this one?
Great episode, but it's always been very hard for me to watch. And now, 34 years after its initial release, doubly so. We either have not learned or as a society have willfully ignored the need to consider all of our citizens as equals. This episode sought to be relevant social commentary in '89, and it was. What's a tragedy is that racism in the US has not only gone unchecked since then, but gotten far worse and more sinister. Couple that with the increase in social awareness regarding gender identity as a spectrum, yet the laws in the US make life nearly unbearable for people who identify differently than their sex assigned at birth. I think the quote by Maddox says it all. He's like, rights? I'm sick to death of hearing about rights. And Guinan's quote takes us back to the days of legal slavery in the US, as well as to the concentration camps in World War II. You don't have to think about their welfare. You don't think about how they feel. Whole generations of disposable people. Her acting is amazing, but one thing you could not hide was the intensity of emotion as she was speaking about this. The clenching of her right temple tells us all we need to know about how she feels about that when she's speaking those lines. It was just she conveyed it right there with that temple pulsing right there. The persistent misgendering of bimatics of Data was incredibly painful to watch. I wanted to throw something very heavy at my TV yet again. This could have been a court of cisgender people trying the case of a trans person, but as it was a court of white people trying the case of a silver-skinned individual. Maybe in another 34 years, America will be able to hold its head up higher than it's entitled to do today. But we need not only hope. We can continue to spread the love, and true kindness is seen every day in the hearts, the words, the deeds of the people that participate in this seventh rule community. This microcosm is what the whole country should be like. So I guess in summation, great episode, very lacking social response. That's it.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Mai. Carrie Schwent is here, aka Crafty Bear. Your thoughts?
So many thoughts. I have a few fun tidbits that I'll save for afterwards, including why I picked this particular t-shirt, but we'll save that for later. I hadn't watched this episode in probably a really long time. Pretty much the only Star Trek series that I really rewatched on a regular basis was Voyager. I hadn't really done very many rewatches of Next Gen. Now I'd almost forgotten like a lot of the details of this episode. And because of going through all 3 seasons of Picard, and then going through the Next Gen episodes in depth the way we have been, and the way I do when I take notes on literally every single scene, it like takes me 4 hours to document one episode. Yeah, I'll have to show you guys sometime. But I was unprepared when I watched it the first time before I took my notes of just the emotional roller coaster that this episode takes you on. And the scene that really, the one tiny little scene, and it has no dialogue whatsoever, that kind of encapsulates that roller coaster, is when Riker's doing his homework for the hearing and he's pulling up data schematics and he sees something and he's like, I can use that. That'll win me the case. Oh crap, that'll win me the case. Just that whole emotional roller coaster that he goes on. And the only toasters I want that are around, those are the Cylons on Battlestar Galactica. Those are the only toasters. And even in that show, they use that as very much as a slur towards the metal versions of the Cylons. And that whole series kind of relates to this episode too. But I will finish by going a bit philosophical, and I present for the defense the following Exhibit D for Data. There is no easy way to measure a man. So many facets we must understand. Even with no emotions, how does one show devotion and become wiser than we began?
Great stuff.
For thought there.
Thank you very much,
very
Carrie.
prepared to measure all sorts of things with my background.
Wow.
I'm not touching
Wow.
that
I had to bring a little funny.
one. And also shout out to Ronald D. Moore, showrunner of Battlestar Galactica. Good knowledge, Carrie. What's up, Justin Weir? What do you think of this one?
Hello. Oh, this is a great episode. I'm going to keep it light, though, because I started taking notes, and as soon as the courtroom stuff starts happening, I kind of just zone out because of how good it is. It's crazy to me. So this is the flagship Enterprise, and you have the bridge crew. And this doctor can just get an order to take one of the bridge crew away without anyone consulting Picard. Like that, I was like, that's a little weird. Maybe he convinced them that we could get a bunch of datas, and they went with that. I thought it funny during the courtroom scene that when Data was first on the stand and he listed all of his medals, and Picard was like, I want to hear all this. But when Maddox takes the same seat, he goes, all right, yes, we get it. You're a genius. I thought the music was fantastic. It really set the tone for each scene. Like when Data was packing, it was real light. But as soon as Maddox walks in, the tone just went. You could feel it got more intense. Yeah, the poker scene, Data wearing a visor, little things like that. It's hilarious. He's the card guy, so he's got the visor on. And I've heard a lot of great lines, but my favorite line came from Picard when he said, "I've been trying to make sense of this gobbledygook, but it's beyond me." But yeah, great episode. It's nice to see you all.
Great seeing you too. Great shirt.
Yeah.
Isn't gobbledygook a line from
I have no idea.
The movie with the chocolate factory.
Oh,
Willy
In the
Wonka.
chocolate factory. Willy Wonka.
Really?
Gobbledygook.
It is a fairly common British word. We do use that.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it just means sort of all jumbled up. It doesn't make sense.
Oh, that's gobbledygook.
Yeah.
Without gobbledygook, I wouldn't say a thing. Denise, you like that one a little too much.
True. All right. I'll bring it down a little bit. I'm gonna put myself on mute.
Never, please never. Faith Howell is here. What's up, Faith? What do you think of this episode?
So historically, this is not one of my favorite episodes. I think especially watching it as a young child, TJ, give me a minute. No, I'm coming from it from Data's my bud. You know, I'm 3 years old probably at the time this was first airing, and
Oh God, don't rub it in, Faith.
Data
Don't rub
was
it
sorry guys, but you know. But Data was the coolest thing out there at that time, and I was totally in love with him. And so to come in and try to attack Data was not happening. And so I'm coming from that point, watching this episode fresh after a few years. And it definitely hit different. And I really appreciated the touchstones to some pretty, you know, memorable sci-fi, like written sci-fi. Some of you guys probably can give better titles than I could right off the top of your heads, but I think some of the most memorable things rewatching this episode were like looking at Maddox and thinking about how can you stand against someone joining Starfleet in the first place, and then once they're in Starfleet, now you're property of Starfleet. That logic doesn't pan out for me. I also really loved that little moment that I definitely missed until this rewatch, where Data says, I gave my word, and it hit me. It never happened. And I was like, oh my God, I know you guys probably got that, but that was my first like, oh, that's so sweet. But yeah, I did the math too, Chris. And definitely Data's faster than my iPhone by a lot. So there we go.
Okay.
Because he's an Android.
Yeah.
Very good. Great stuff. Thank you, Faith. Goldie Scott, what's up? What do you got for us today?
This is the first time I have watched this particular episode in so many years, particularly since we have seen season 1 of Picard. So boy, do we know what is coming to Maddox in the distant future. We also know what he does do, regardless of what he learns at the end of this episode as well. And as Faith was saying, I did pull a lot of the similarities from some Golden Age sci-fi with particularly like Asimov's robot stories that led into Foundation, and a lot of his questioning on what makes sentience and what makes a living being. And there's some Clifford Simic stuff in there too, as well as some like Bradbury's Martian Chronicles. It's really like asking the questions of what is human. You know, human is a very broad term in this, but I do find that this is really the episode. I will go ahead and admit that I don't relate to Data as much as a lot of other folks do. And I know that is definitely, you know, Data, Spock, Odo does it. a lot of people can grab on to relate to Data, but this is the first episode where I feel like I really do catch what's going on. And I like that it does so easily lay out empathy right in front of you, because at the very beginning of the episode, you're like, of course, Data's, of course. And then you're pissed by the end of it, because you're like, they better leave him alone. Leave him alone. So I love the gradual show it, don't say it, but show it throughout. And while they are, there's plenty of dialogue and stuff. But yeah, the whole episode, great. Definitely. I will say that this is so far my favorite episode of the series. And I think it's up there with Inner Light, which we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, stay tuned for that one. Good stuff. Thank you, Goldu Scott. Jason Okun is here from abroad somewhere. What do you think of this episode?
Hi, everybody. To me, frankly, that this is a Star Trek classic, probably up there with the best of them all. It certainly comes down from the lineage of courtroom dramas that Star Trek has done before, certainly from Court Martial of the original series and the Menagerie. And it's certainly not the last time Star Trek has tried this, sometimes not so successfully with the Matter of Perspective, and sometimes really successfully with the Drumhead, which I think is probably one of maybe my favorite Next Gen episode. But we'll get to that down the line. A lot has been said about it, and I'll say some of the details for later in terms of how the script turned out, and Denise, what I've been saying actually for a lot of the episodes of the second season was surprised the hell out of me is how much doctoring, how much great doctoring has been going on into the scripts from, I guess, their earlier versions to the last, and this is actually no exception. I mean, it's a great script by Melinda Snodgrass, but I think there's quite a bit of interesting doctoring went on there. I think the scene with Picard and Guinan was rewritten almost entirely.
Ooh,
it's
yeah.
not like that in the script at all. There was a lot more about sort of this relationship between Picard and Lavoie. They sort of had this kind of literally a lover's relationship. There's a lot more of that in the script, and that's probably why this whole thing about the sexy man is there. It's in the original script, it's in there. And it fit a lot more from that perspective, because that's what a lot of what they were talking about. But again, it just turned out to be a classic, and I think the way it was doctored up a little bit and the way it turned out is tremendous. I think the performance is great. I mean, most of the time, I'm not a big fan of the meat and potatoes type directing, and here it certainly was. And I guess for courtroom drama, where you basically sit in a room, and this could be actually done as a stage play if you really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is more of a stage play type thing, and
I would love to see.
I would love to watch that on stage. This would have been terrific to just kind of sit there and experience something like that. And I think the performances are terrific. I think Patrick is great in this. I think there's a lot of sort of passion in here. And certainly, Frakes' performance. I mean, I know the sort of reaction when he learns that, he's about to do some damage to Data. That's actually in the script. It actually says that he's supposed to sort of react that way. Actually, Data's cap is also in the script, which is kind of interestingly described. And what I found really interesting is Pulaski's presence in the poker game. It was not in the original script. It was put in there, and her lines were actually spoken by O'Brien. Some of those lines got taken away from him. And given to Dr. Pulaski, which was great. I think her presence there was tremendous, and I think it was important. And the last thing I'll say is, a lot of times when things are cut from an episode or from a movie, they slow down pacing. They aren't exactly great, but if you watch the extended version, I think it really sort of adds to this quite a bit. There's a lot more in terms of character that goes into this. It's just a tremendous episode, and I think the way it turned out, both in terms of performances and in terms of the way the script was finished, was absolutely great. And again, I enjoyed it tremendously the first time, the second time, and however many times I watched it, and certainly now.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jason Okun. The Matt Boardman is here. What's up, Matt? What do you think of this one?
Hey, this is a fantastic episode. I don't know if anybody else had this, probably did, but back in the 90s, late 90s, there was they did a digital version of the Star Trek Encyclopedia that had little video clips, and this courtroom scene where Picard is, doing the do you was on there, and it was one that I used to watch over and over because it was, I don't know, it's such a powerful moment to me. And today, as I was watching it through again, it reminded me of A Few Good Men. which is a favorite movie of mine. And I love that final interaction where Colonel Jessup just loses it, right? And I for some reason was reminded of that today. But another quick thing, I remember back in '94 when Next Generation was about to go off the air, they did a series of episodes that were voted as fan favorites, and this was one of those episodes that was in that group of episodes. But there's just, I'm sure everybody has talked about so many things, because clearly my timing is not digital, and I showed up a half hour late, and and so there are a few things that I'm sure that I missed, but I don't know if it was discussed where the name of the title came from. Which I thought was interesting because it popped up as a little, like, did you know, on Amazon. And it says that the title comes from a statement by Plato, which said, the measure of man is what he does with power. But then it goes on to say that the direct source for this episode, however, is most likely Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s version, which he said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And that hit me. That was really, really powerfully, because I mean, of things that everybody has talked about in relation to a defining moment of how, as human beings, as the Federation, how do we treat this group of this synthetic life, and is that not a reflection upon us as a society, how we choose to treat? I don't know, I'm weird. Even my Alexa, I like say thank you and everything too, because the day that our robot overlords come over and take over, I want to be among the ones that they choose not to eliminate. But I don't know, that has always been something that has been that I was raised with, that has been instilled in my soul, is that a reflection of who we are is in how we treat other people. And then one last final thing, to me, this is one of the most significant things of this episode, is when everything is said and done, look at how Data treats Maddox. I mean, here is a man who wanted to take him and disassemble him and dump his core memory and do whatever, with the very distinct possibility to destroy and eliminate Data from existence. And yet when everything is said and done, Data walks up to him and he says, you know what, I find that there is some merit in what you have proposed, and I am curious to see where things go from here. And that to me it's a lesson in forgiveness. It's a lesson that I think a lot, and I don't want to get into politics and stuff like that, but I feel like where it's, to me, that is significant in the world that we live in right now. And I find that is amazing. An amazing thing about Star Trek is that no matter what year that we live in, there is something that pertains to our current situation. And I think that there is a lesson to be gained there by treating people with civility and with forgiveness and with love, despite how they might despitefully use us. And then again, Riker at the end there, who was injured by what he had to do, but Data, showed that love for Riker. This action injured you, but it helped me, and I will forever be grateful for that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, the Matt Boardman. Well, big day. Final thoughts, Denise and Cirroc?
Wow, just like always, I've got this one idea going on in my head, and then I listen to you guys, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, that's happening. Well, this was really wonderful for me to be here with you guys and watch this episode. This is the first time I've ever seen it. I certainly have heard of, of Measure of a Man, the Measure of a Man over the years. And so, and it always shows up as one of the fan favorites. And so but I never had the opportunity or the wherewithal to sit down and watch it, until this. And that is really a gift for me to experience. I really loved everything about it. The provocation, the thought that what we're grappling with, and the seamless layering of the issues of sentient beings and property, and how this comes into play, how we really put these two elements on trial. And it's really something that we're still grappling with. This is just an endless sort of evolution of who we are, and grappling still with these issues. I think having, you guys will see the earlier segment with Melinda Snodgrass, who wrote this, and it was really illuminating. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but the fact that she came out of the blue here with this script and just broke a lot of barriers and held her own with such a powerful piece of writing was really something to behold. She's tremendous, and you guys will get a chance to see her. So yeah, it for me too, it introduces something that will be grounded forever in the kind of lore of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that is the relationship with Data and Tasha. By him holding on to that hologram, and as a significant piece in his life, it really it bookmarks on the other end of of Picard. We'll see how it all kind of comes together, that and resolves a lot of what I couldn't do in the final my hologram delivered in Skin of Evil. So it sort of puts a nice bow around that. And I hadn't seen that. I wasn't aware of that. When Ryan, when you called me and said, you should come on for Measure of Man, because there is an element of Tasha Yar, and I went,
a lot.
There is? Yeah. So, but much more than just showing that hologram, it really signifies how this relationship is part of who what this show is about, that Tasha is still very present. So it was really wonderful to kind of see that and know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just going to expand on the Dred Scott decision, which was really the thing that kind of led to the Civil War. And in the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Chief Justice Tierney, he wrote that the court ruled that people of African descent, quote, are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. Further went on to say that, quote, a perpetual and impassable barrier was intended to be erected between the white race and the one which they had reduced to slavery. Now that's the quote from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time. mentioning that there was supposed to be a perpetual and impassable barrier between the races. And, you know, that made me think about rights being stripped away. It made me think about the feeling of not being included and feeling hopeless. And I felt that Data kind of encapsulated those feelings when Picard, you know, said to him, well, this is the situation and you, this is what the deal is. And he says, well, I guess I've been reduced to only one option. I think that was the line that he gave. And that's the problem, is being reduced to only one option in life and only have one road that you can travel. And that is what handicaps or restricts us from being able to be ourselves and be free. When you only have a certain lane you can travel and you're not allowed to divert from that lane. And I think they address that kind of that mentality and how it has long-term ramifications, which they addressed in this episode, talking about what this precedence would mean going forward in the future. And I think that if we think about our actions in a way that we are thinking about kinds of precedences being set in the future, then we can be more responsible about how we behave in the present. So I think that's an important correlation that was made in this episode.
Cirroc dropping bars right there, man. Very good. Do you have more?
No, that's it. That's it.
All right.
So, save the rest.
We'll all collect ourselves now for a minute. That was amazing. Thank you, Cirroc.
Right?
All right. And thank you, Melissa, Eve, Allison, Chris, TJ, Justin, Carrie, Mai, Sue, Faith, Goldu Scott, Jason the Outrageous Okun, and the Matt Boardman. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you to Denise Crosby for coming back to co-host with us again. We are forever fortunate for that.
Anytime. I've missed you all. Oh my
What
goodness.
a surprise.
I'm a little rusty.
So for Denise, myself, Cirroc, Melissa, and of course, Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, thank you all very much for joining us. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.